debut episode of a new show that I have with my co-host Wilbert, Wibo, Boles. We are calling this Rich and Wibo Present the Local Artist Show. There is so much hidden talent that never gets seen or heard. Wibo and I are hoping to change that. Our first guest began playing and writing music back in 1964. He has toured all over the world, opening for some of the biggest names in the business. They include James Taylor, Pure Prairie League, Roger McGuinn, Arlo Guthrie, Dan Seals, and Eddie Rabbitt, just to name a few. COVID may have taken a toll on the current music scene, but our guest is hopeful, and so are me and Wibo, that he and his trio will be back performing and entertaining the masses very, very soon. Please welcome local artist extraordinaire Dave Quick to the debut episode of Rich and Wibo Present the Local Artist Show. Dave, so glad to have you on this debut episode.
How are you? How are you?
Good to see you, Dave.
So what I want to talk about first, before we even get into what we're talking to Dave, Wibo, this is your idea. You had this show a long time ago. You brought me on as a co-host, and you used to have a show where we highlighted the local artists, which I think is a very, very important thing because everybody knows the big names out there, but there's so much hidden talent, like I mentioned in the intro. And Dave, just mentioning some of the names that you played with is amazing. And I definitely want to get into from the beginning all the way up until now. But Wibo, thank you very much for helping me put this together.
You're welcome, bro. Thank you, Rich.
The first of many, many shows. It's Dave. It's all about you now.
Oh, Lord.
How about you, Dave?
I had a lot of fun with Wibo when we were doing those radio shows. As I'd say, you know, he would bring artists on and they would play their CDs and people would call in and they'd ask questions and stuff. And I think one of the most wonderful nights we ever had is we each looked at each other and said, what do you want to do tonight? And somebody called in and said, do you do requests? And for almost 40 minutes, we had people calling in asking me to do requests. And we just played whatever anybody wanted to hear.
I know.
It was a fun night.
That was fun. That was a fun night.
Did you play
All that live on the radio.
Did they play your songs or was it just other artists?
Everything.
All right. See, I like that.
Now for you.
Now you play bass.
I started off playing bass in high school only because the band I was in didn't have a bass player. It had 3 guitar players and a drummer. So I took it up and I played bass through high school. I got drafted halfway through my senior year, and going into the service, taking a bass guitar and an amplifier with you isn't very convenient. So after I got through basic and got settled in, I had purchased an acoustic guitar and stayed on that for all these years, but still play bass and drums with some different bands around here now.
Well, you know what? You bring up a great point because everybody wants to be the guitar hero or the lead singer.
Yep.
It's the bass and the drums that keep the band together. They're the timekeepers. Without the bass player and the drummer, there would be no band. So I love the fact that you said, you know what? All right, there's no bass players. I don't have an ego. I'm going to take up the bass. It worked out well for Paul McCartney.
Well,
Yeah.
it did. Well, my neighbor, Rob Ross, who has been playing bass with me on and off since 1979, would love to hear that the bass player is a very important guy. That would work well with him. Yes.
Have him give me a call. I'll
Very
definitely.
well. He's next.
He's a good bass player, too.
He is. He is.
Oh, yeah.
Now, for you, did you know from an early age that you wanted to be a musician?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In elementary school. Now, I picked up a clarinet, 3rd or 4th grade. I knew I loved music. I knew I didn't care for the instrument, but I played in the elementary school band, and I love music. I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And then the traditional excuse was my folks were not smart enough to keep me from seeing the Ed Sullivan Show the night the Beatles were on. And I immediately sold my clarinet and got a guitar. And I was from old school. My father told me that I could purchase absolutely anything I wanted as soon as I could afford it. And in that way, I immediately went to work on the farms, and every guitar, every string, every chord, everything I had was from working hard on the farms in order to get my music equipment, with the one exception. My father at the time owned a 65 Ford station wagon. And he went and put if you remember what a station wagon was, He put the second seat down. He measured from the first seat to the trunk and in between the wheel wells. And I went to a place called Lafayette Sound that was prior to Radio Shack. And I bought two 15-inch speakers, and he built me a speaker cabinet that just fit into that Ford station wagon.
Wow.
And it took two people to move it. The only thing we forgot to do is when we closed the tailgate on the station wagon, we forgot that we needed to put casters on it. And the speaker box was too big. We had to get one of those furniture movers to take it out of the car and move it. It was huge, but I was so proud of that speaker cabinet. And most people in high school don't remember me, but they remember my speaker cabinet.
Well, you know what I think it's funny? You brought up a great point. I was going to talk about Ed Sullivan because I've interviewed many musicians for my show, and every musician within a certain age group always says, it was that moment watching the Beatles and Ed Sullivan that really changed my life, that made me want to be a musician. And you know what I like about the Ed Sullivan Show the most? I'm 52 years old, so I missed that. I know what he is. I've seen the shows in repeats, but I like the fact that his show was a talent show basically that exposed so many people to different things. People that like rock and roll, then the next thing would be a folk trio. After that would be a guy juggling plates. He had so many different eclectic guests on there, and you got to witness so many different kinds of things and realize like, oh wow, there's so many other things out there besides the Doors or the Beatles or this. But the Beatles is probably, every musician I talked to, like I said, within a certain age group had said the same answer. It's time for me to buy a guitar now or a bass.
They took a lot of different kinds of music, put it together and refined it and came out with a hybrid of our 50s rock and roll.
Yeah.
But what was truly amazing, and again, in those days, you remember the technology today is so different.
Oh yeah, it is.
In those days, the second show they did after Ed Sullivan was in a hockey rink in Washington, D.C. And all they had for equipment, we're talking the Beatles now, all they had of equipment was the one Rogers drum set, two microphones, two stands, and three 100-watt amplifiers, which today are considered toys.
Yeah,
right.
And they played inside the hockey rink, and they didn't have a PA system. They hitched up to the announcer's PA for the hockey rink and sang through that. If you can imagine trying to play guitar next to a drum set and hear yourself coming through the announcer's speakers in the ceilings, and they still pulled it off.
Well, I heard an interview with Ringo, and he was saying when they played Shea Stadium, he had to look and see what Paul was doing because he could not hear what they were singing, what they were playing, what they were doing. If Paul would stop playing, he would stop playing because he couldn't hear a thing because people were screaming so loud. And like you said, they really didn't have a PA system even for that show. And I think it's amazing because even watching that footage, they sound great.
They do. And there were no monitors of any kind.
No.
They hadn't invented them yet. Yep. It was just the combination of the screaming and with no monitors. And of course, my father, when he was in Yale during World War II, there's a little band that was practicing in his dorm called the Glenn Miller Band.
Yes.
So my father knew a little bit about music. Well, he knew what he thought was good music. And the first couple times we heard the Beatles, he just shook his head. Nah. But the third time the third show the Beatles played in Miami, Florida, and Paul and George and John came out and sang a cappella the song "This Boy."
Yep.
And my father turned around, looked at me, and said, "You know, those boys just might make it."
Well, you know what I love about them and just music in general? Back then, you were able to be a 20-year overnight success, meaning that you didn't, now they get 5 kids that look alike, sound alike, dance alike, sing alike. One that they go on tour, make $1 million in 5 months, and then all right, next band, 5 kids that look like, sound alike. You can never get a band progress like that now. Like starting off with Love, Love Me Do, all the way to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. If a band ever tried that now, they'd be like, oh my God, they sold out. They're horrible. They don't sound like they used to. I love the fact that back then they were able to experiment. They were able to try different things. And one of the most amazing things about the Beatles, the Paul McCartney, I heard an interview with him, and he said that every time he recorded an album, he would listen to it again before he wrote a new song because he did not want to copy anything from the last album. And it's amazing that they were able to do. I know other bands too, like Rolling Stones and people in the 60s are my favorite era for music. So I just love talking about this. But the fact that you were able to do that back then, now just everything's so homogenized, so packaged, so prepackaged. It's just the scene. We're gonna talk about the music scene later on, but I more want to talk about you. And you definitely got your start listening to the Beatles. But it's funny because if you saw my record collection, I can go from Glenn Miller to the Beatles to Slayer to the Carpenters. I have there's so much great music out there. I don't want to limit myself just to one. I'm like that with everything. I like to listen to all different kinds of music, see all different kinds of movies. And so I can go from Mozart to the band Exodus, which is a metal band, in a matter
of true music appreciation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is.
You know, the Beatles were innovators. That's what the most interesting thing about them is what, like you just said, they were innovators. And every album that came out, you just turned around and said, "What?"
Yeah.
And yet, and there is no such formula that you can say or that you can follow that's going to make you successful. Because on the other side of the fence, I will mention a band that stayed together longer than anybody else, that's been more successful than anybody else, and has had almost no innovation, has stayed absolutely true to their blues roots, and that's the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
Their music, they had an album or two that started to touch in disco and other things, but they backed right off and they stuck with their roots. And if the Stones come out today with a new song, you could have released it back in the 60s as a hit. They have stayed true. The only thing that would have mattered is that they had a gentleman named Brian Jones, who was actually the original founder. And he could play any instrument in the world. He was a virtuoso.
Yeah.
He was the guy who came in and played on Under My Thumb and wheeled in a xylophone into the studio. And they didn't even know what a xylophone was. And he made the bass player play double tracks with a fuzz box to get different effects. And they had no, he was true. He was the real innovator where, Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, they're geniuses in their own right, but they stuck to their groove. They've kept to their groove. They've refined their groove, and you got to give them the credit where that is due phenomenally.
Well, it's similar to they record an album, put them and froze them in ice. Had them frozen in ice, unthaw them, record another album, freeze them in ice again, unthaw. It's almost like they're frozen in time, but they keep on coming up. But it's great because I love consistency. I think that's a good thing, and I love the genre that they perform. But the Beatles I do like because they experiment a lot. And you know what I loved? I don't know if there's a documentary I saw. It's called Echo in the Valley. It's all about the Laurel Canyon area. But what I like about that, I'm sure there was competition and I'm sure there was a lot of egos involved. But for the most part, they all lived in this little area in Laurel Canyon, California, and they would all just go from house to house, bringing their guitars. Hey, man, you gotta listen to this song. You gotta hear this. So the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson was saying that he got Pet Sounds because of listening to Rubber Soul. The Beatles heard Pet Sounds and whoa, listen to this. They did Sgt. Pepper, so they always were influenced by each other, and they always were not worried about the other person overshadowing them. They're like, hey man, it's a great song. You got to hear this one. And Eric Clapton was like, yeah, I ripped a lot of them off. I didn't even realize at the time, but George Harrison come in, play this riff. And then it was funny because in the documentary they show the George Harrison playing his song, and then Eric Clapton, yeah, maybe I did rip that off. I didn't realize it, but I like the fact that they just it was like one big, I guess it was one big party, but there was really not a lot of competition. They all helped each other out. They all supported each other. And I think that's a big thing that you need in the music scene. I was in local bands myself, and I love the fact like, hey man, we have a gig. You want to come down? And I'd do the same thing, vice versa. But you, on the other hand, you played with some major talent, as I mentioned in the intro. Roger McGuinn, Arlo Guthrie, James Taylor. How did you, we're going to get into all that because I know you worked at Capitol Records, which I want to talk about, but that's later on. Did you, when you were out of the Army or out of the military, I should say. I'm not sure if you're in the Army or Navy.
Air Force.
Air Force. Okay, that was my next guess. I only had two more. Did you have an agent that was getting you these gigs?
I will tell you, back in the very early 80s, Connecticut had very few, very limited radio station access.
Mm.
And I was, you know, I got out of the bands in high school in my senior year, and the bands were all headed toward Grand Funk Railroad and Led Zeppelin, and I was headed towards Neil Young and Crosby, Stills, Nash, a totally different direction. And it was almost in those days, folk rock, you know, was almost headed towards country. So I was got out of the band in 79 because the band was tremendous amount of fun, but they couldn't make any money here.
Mm.
And yes, I did meet an agent, Johnny Paris, Act One Entertainments in New Haven, and put me together as a solo act. And it wasn't glamorous. I wasn't playing on stage in front of 400 people and girls and lights and smoke screens and everything else. I was playing in, you know, 4- and 5-star restaurants as a soloist. And these guys, all of my friends, were making all the glory. I was making all the money. And in those days when I needed to support a family, making the money was more important to me than having the glory. So, and I did very well. But all of a sudden, I heard this new radio station called 92.5.
Mm.
And I said, oh, I wonder if they can really get off with bringing country into Connecticut. And they brought in crossover country, not the hard, original, traditional. They brought in people who had been in rock and roll, but were playing kind of country music.
Yeah.
Creedence Clearwater had broken up. Their members were in a country band. The Byrds had broken up. Their members were in a country band. Vince Gill was just coming on the scene, and it was a soft introduction to country. So myself and another individual, we took all of the 40 songs on the top 40 of Country 92.5, and we learned them. And because we figured that this was the new and upcoming thing that would be marketable and in demand.
Yeah.
And we were playing at a place across from the Horse down in Waterbury.
My hometown.
Yep. And a gentleman walked up to us and said, I'm Floyd Wright from 92.5. You boys just did my whole genre. I want to hire you.
Wow.
And so they started a concert series, summer concert series at Mohawk Ski Area, and put up a big stage. And I was one of the opening acts for all of the major people that came in that year. And that was my start in meeting those people and playing a lot. I mean, Vince Gill was at the time, hadn't even started his solo career. He was playing lead guitar for Pure Prairie League.
Mm-hmm.
So I first met him and nobody knew who he was. He wasn't anybody yet. He was a hired gun. But those were some nice concert series. And Eddie Rabbit and Dan Seals, we did downtown here at the Warner Theater and with a number of other ones. And, while 92.5 was up and coming for a while there, they were very generous with us, handing us a lot of work.
Wow.
And so was the agency. I worked for Johnny Paris for 30 years until he passed away. And I was kept very busy.
Now, growing up, did you always, I know you always performed, but were you making music as a living in your early 20s and so on until you went to the military?
My birthday's in January. I turned 18 as a senior in high school. I already had my draft card.
Oh, wow. So,
and yes, I was doing gigs and making money, but not, living on it. I was still a teenager at home. I got out of the service. I was 23 years old. And that's when my father had always told me that I had a talent and that I played and I enjoyed playing. I enjoyed entertaining. but he said, please, please, please don't depend on it.
Yeah.
So I had always had a second and third job so that I had medical benefits, I had my own support, and I could play as much as I could around that support. And I
Mhm.
played 3-4 nights a week and held a 40-hour-a-week job for years,
Wow.
years
Now-
and years.
Now, I mentioned before you worked with Capitol Records. Was that before you went into the military?
Yeah, my guidance counselor in high school, his brother was one of the R&B guys in the Capitol Records in Boston. And we did some work for them. Again, that was as a hired gun because they would bring bands in, and sadly, in the late 60s, you'd bring a band in to play in the studio, and studio time, as you know, costs a lot of money. And heroin and everything else was pretty big in those days. And they'd bring a guy in, and if the guy couldn't play, they'd be calling out for anybody to come in and play the ghostwriter, you know. So yeah, I played bass guitar on many records that, you know, my name doesn't exist, but I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing it.
Who were some of the musicians that you played on their records?
Group called Strawberry Alarm Clock
I
was the
love
first
them.
one I worked on.
Incense
But,
and Peppermints.
they had some issues with some of the members, and you know, I can't name names, that's not fair. But that's how we got started in Boston. And of course, I went to Boston with my acoustic guitar because it cost me $1.25 on the train from Nashua, New Hampshire. And I would take for 10 cents, get on the trolley and go to Harvard Square. And you walk into a coffee shop in those days, and they would give you free coffee and muffins for you to sit down on the stool and play your guitar. And you'd open up your guitar case and people throw money. And that was my way of really learning how to sit down, not only to play to people, but you have to learn how to talk to people. Being a real entertainer, I mean, it's for me. I can get in front of 50,000 people and play, and no issue at all. But if you sit in someone's living room and there's only 5 people in that living room you're playing for, it's a whole different story. That was harder for me to do. And to go in a coffee shop and not only play to people, but look them straight in the face. Feel, you're projecting your feelings to them and seeing if you're getting a response. There's a different kind of contact. There's a whole different kind of intimacy when you're really playing to people up close than just playing to the masses. And I learned that.
Well, it's funny because I am just the opposite of you. I was in bands when in my 20s. I did radio for a little while, but then I did stand-up comedy. Now I'm doing motivational speaking. So I feed off the audience, and it could be 5 people, could be 50,000, as you said. And it's just I love that response. When I'm in radio, I'm not really sure who's listening, if they're enjoying what I'm doing, what I'm saying. But when I'm live, I acted as well. When I'm live and I see that instant response, it's just, if it's going well, it makes me want to play or do whatever I'm doing even harder.
Absolutely. And this is why this kind of work, I've seen a lot of people do these Zoom things on Facebook to entertain whoever's listening. It doesn't work for me. I gotta have a real audience. I can't look into a screen and entertain a screen. To me, it's just too sterile an environment.
Exactly. No, I agree with you. So how long were you with Capitol Records?
Just through my years in high school, that I worked with them. And, you know, we would write little ditties, and, you know, 6 months later, you'd hear them on somebody else's record, you know, and that's what we'd get $80, $100 a ditty or something like that. And back in the 60s, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Of course, we were kind of stupid because we didn't know what they were really paying. But, you know, there's a learning process, you know, there's a learning process involved in the business. And it can be a very nasty business. It is a labor of love for anyone to get out there and be playing every week like I still do at my age. You have to.
29, right?
I haven't stopped. COVID did not stop me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. And I love that because there's so many ways to get around COVID and do different things. Like you said, streaming isn't working for you, but I see a lot of bands, and even worse, I see comedians do it. And I just would never be able to do that. Like you said, I need that audience feedback. I can't just sit there. It's too sterile for me.
Right.
But for you, you played with so many great legendary artists. Was there anybody that took you to the side and became your mentor and said, this is what you should do, and then sort of guided you with your career?
Well, absolutely not.
Really?
Because the competition, the level of work and discipline that it takes to hold your position once you get there, it's extremely difficult to think you're going to take someone else on. And you meet so many great people every day.
Yeah.
There were musicians that I met who were extremely friendly and sit down and talk to you. There were some musicians who wouldn't give you the time of day. There were other musicians like I will mention one gentleman. Unfortunately, he's deceased, but Dan Seals
Yes.
of England Dan and John Ford Coley was one of the nicest people I've ever met. You know, he just, hey, Dave, let's walk down the street. Show me Torrington. What goes on here? Where can we go fishing? You know, do the. He was genuine.
Yeah.
He was genuine. He took his family with him out on the road. He always had at least one of his kids with him out on the road, whether he was selling shirts or tickets or doing something. There was nothing phony about him. He was so genuine and so nice and so good a person.
You know what I happen to find is I go to a lot of conventions, I meet a lot of different celebrities, and it seems like the people that are maybe like mid-celebrity have the biggest egos. It seems like they have more to prove. Once they get to a certain level, they seem like, all right, you know what? I have nothing to prove anymore. I've done what I want to do. And they seem like they're more down to earth than some of the people that are still on the up and coming or who are really popular. I'm not sure if you had that same experience because with you, they were in competition with you, but I don't see why that would be a big deal because my motto is, why are you always in competition with them? Why don't you work together? And you could probably get more things done working together instead of working against each other.
Well, there are people at the top of the echelon who enjoy working together.
Yeah.
It's just found that it is so hard to stay at that level. You have to remain so focused and so innovative to keep yourself moving forward.
Yeah.
That to take on somebody else, as I said, and as I said, there's so many people you meet every day that are phenomenal musicians standing in line, going hungry. You know, like I said, some of them are very friendly. Some of them could care less, and you could see some of them were just straining to keep their head above water because they had so many other personal things going on.
I was in radio for a while and I interned with a disc jockey named Lich. I don't know if you remember that name.
Sure, I know the Lich.
Oh,
yeah, the Lich.
Legendary little guy. So he interviewed a lot of stars, and one of the people that he interviewed was Eddie Money, or Eddie. Yeah, was it Eddie? Oh, Eddie Money. Who'd you work with? Eddie Rabbit.
Yes.
Oh, Eddie Rabbit. So anyway, but anyway, I'm trying to think of in Jefferson Starship he worked with. I'm not sure if you worked with them, but
No.
they were very, very down to earth and very nice. But out of all the people that you met and played, because I mentioned the big James Taylor. What was it like working with him? That must have been a big thrill.
It was not a really great day. I mean, I was honored to be there.
Yeah.
He played well. He had just finished his divorce with Carly Simon, and he was a broken man.
Okay. Well,
he was, you know, it's just like I said, you know, you meet people, they're going through life. You can meet him at a high point. You can meet him at a low point. He was very quiet, very reserved, not disrespectful by any means, but he wasn't the bubbly guy that I had expected to see at that time.
Now, when you were playing with all these bands, were you playing all your original music, or were you playing a mixture of original with covers?
No, I was doing originals.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a huge mistake when I went to Nashville. To compete in the Be a Star show, because television, again, you know, you can look back and realize what you did good and what you could have done better. Television is looking for a singer to do an extremely popular song as good or better than the original artist. You could be a great singer, but if you sing your own song, nobody's ever heard it before. You've already cut yourself down, because the people aren't ready to tap their foot yet. It's the first time they've heard the song.
Yeah.
And I went to Nashville looking to be discovered as a songwriter, not just a TV competitor kind of thing. And so that was a true experience. The whole Nashville thing was a true experience for sure.
Dave, you ready by that, Dave? Because I've done a lot of shows and stuff around the state and stuff, right? And you do original songs, they not. They said, "What's that?" You do a cover tune, you got in.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And like some of the people who try to make it with some of the professionals, you met some professionals, I met professionals, we all met professional people. And some of the people, man, they walk right by you.
Oh,
They
sure.
forget about who paying their salary. They think they're better than them, better than whoever, you know what I mean? It's people got that kind of attitude. They got the flame going on in their cars and there's money, a lot of women, and all that stuff there. It's not right, man. You know what I mean?
No, well,
We're all in the same boat.
there is a different kind of audience, though. I'm sure Rich is aware that if you're playing at a club that is doing all the right things, then they're paying between $2,300 and $2,600 a year to belong to ASCAP or BMI, so that you can have people play other people's material in your club. I'll say right off the top, and I'm not afraid to do this, it's called piracy.
Yeah.
Because there is no one I've ever met in ASCAP or BMI that knows what songs I'm playing in any club at any given time, and that money is going to the artist that I happen to be playing for.
Yeah.
There is no system to get the money to the right people. It's just truly piracy. But on the other hand, if you're playing in a coffee house, they do not pay those fees. They are only looking for people. They're only looking for people who play original material.
Yeah.
It's a whole different concept altogether.
Yeah.
So you go into the coffee houses, there will be people there who are specifically there to listen to original material. It's a whole different genre, but you got to find that. That's not in the typical club that you're going to walk into, where people are going in there expecting to hear a certain kind of music and tap their foot and enjoy it. And you play something that's out of that realm, you lost their attention.
Yeah.
And they're doing a promotion for a place that I used to do comedy. It's called the Mediator Stage in Providence, Rhode Island. And it's similar to an open mic, but I was a feature there. I did 45 minutes, but on Thursdays they have musicians. You sign up and you can play whatever you want. And it's a former church. It's a great venue. They have a stage in there. The acoustics are great. And I've met so many excellent musicians playing their own songs. And I have so many downloaded, which we'll get into that later about downloaded or buying, but you can, and I've met so many great musicians just by going to these open mics. And that's one place what you just described of. I love these little coffee houses where you can let people be themselves and play what they want to play instead of worrying about, oh boy, it's 10 o'clock. They're getting drunk. They want to hear something familiar. Freebird.
Exactly. Oh, if I had $1 for every time I heard somebody say Freebird, not to me, but I mean, I wish I had written that one, but I'm talking about any professional concert. There's always a wise guy that's yelling Freebird, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
It was 20 years ago. It's not funny anymore. The joke is over. But you mentioned Nashville and you mentioned Be a Star. What exactly is Be a Star?
Be a Star was the country version of the Stars, Ed McMahon Star Search.
Oh, okay.
We're talking the first round, not all they got 5 or 6 different kinds of them out there today. The Voice, America's Got Talent, all of that crap. These were the two that were the groundbreakers for that kind of stuff. And I, people laugh. I got on a Greyhound bus in Waterbury. I had one guitar, one suitcase. That was it. And I walked into the Opryland gymnasium where they were putting people together, and an artist would come in, and each artist would have an attorney, a manager. The women had their own makeup artists. They had an agent, they had their whole entourage with each person that came in there, thinking that, oh, tomorrow they're going to be a star. They better be ready. They better have all these people lined up. And they sat all the contestants up on an area grandstand. And the guy said, so how many people are here to be a star? And I would say 4/5 of the people raised their hands. And then he said, how many people are here to have a good time?
Yes.
I raised my hand. He said, thank God there's a few of you. He said, because I can sit here in order to get on the show, you had to record 6 of your songs on a CD. Excuse me, before CDs, it was a cassette. They went through almost 10,000 cassettes, and they came up with 800 contestants that they thought were viable. And they told those 800 contestants, now, we want you to go take whatever 6 songs you sent us, the same 6 songs. We want you to go do a video of you playing those 6 songs, so we know you, in fact, did them. There weren't all these, you go to New York City for tryouts stuff back then. So a friend of mine's daughter was in a place called Marist College over in Poughkeepsie, and she was getting an engineering degree. And their last grade of the season was doing a video for me. The whole class got involved in the project, and they did that video, sent the video in, and then they called back and said, okay, you are one of the people who's coming to the show. But as I was getting back to where we were on the grandstand, he said, anybody know who Trish Yearwood is? And I said, yeah. Anybody know who Garth Brooks is? Well, yeah, we know who he is. Well, those 2 people were one of the many people who sent in cassettes to us that we did not accept. You're here today, and we can't tell you why. We liked you, but we can't tell you why we didn't pick Garth Brooks, but we certainly can tell you we didn't, and he's out there today. So if you're here to be a star, we might not be able to see the forest for the trees. I hope some of you are here to have a good time.
I think that's most important. I remember when I was in radio, they used to always tell me, you don't have to be funny, just have fun, and it will translate through to the audience.
Yes.
If you're having a good time, they're having a good time listening to you. You don't have to be telling joke after joke after joke. And the same thing with music. Like if you're up on stage having a good time, it doesn't even have to be technically correct. I could rather be having more fun watching you having fun on stage and making a mistake here and there than somebody trying to be so serious, playing every chord, every note perfect. I'm like snoozing over here while you're on stage having fun. I think when you have fun, that's probably the most important thing. And then usually everything else will fall, only not always, but it'll fall into place more than when you're trying too hard and you get so angry because, oh my God, I was so great tonight. I can't believe they didn't sign me. Just have fun and
exactly. But I will tell you a funny one that my late drummer, Mr. George Fry, who sadly passed away a few years ago. We used to pass these rules off the top of our heads when things were going awry. And George says, band rule number 16-4, paragraph 3. The band is not supposed to be having more fun than the audience. Just remember that.
That's funny.
We had a whole list of rules. We did, and one of my bigger rules was if somebody comes up and says, hey, can you play this song? And we couldn't. And somebody in the band started playing it anyway. Oh, they used to make the hair on the back of my neck go right up. I said, no, look what you've just done. Now you've egged the person on that we're turning down in the same process.
Yeah.
So rule number 14-BC, you cannot play anything for a song that we don't, we had all these rules, but that's what, again, having a band and making it fun.
Yep.
We had a lot of rules.
Yep. There's a motto I like to live by: having fun and getting it done.
Yes.
Yeah. I love to have fun when I'm singing.
I want your opinion on this, Dave. I want your opinion on this because here's my opinion. And I'd love to. you mentioned that, to be a star is similar to the original reality show Star Search, which I loved watching that. I think now in social media it's overloaded, and I think it's created mediocrity. To me, there's really so hard to find greatness anymore in acting and music and this, because anybody you can have in music, we'll go with music since we're talking about that. A person that is great, sounds great, but he only has 4,000 followers. Nah, we're not gonna sign him. But some guy that's not as good, he has 15 million followers. All right, let's get him. So I think it's creating mediocrity with all these talent shows and social media. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier about the Beatles. The 60s, we had something called analog recording.
Yes.
Where you could actually feel someone's energy and intimacy coming through their instrument or their voice. Mm. Today, we have digital recording. And if you go into a room and if you sing just a little bit off, the computer recognizes that and corrects it. The music is sterile. Mm. And because the music is sterile, and because there's only 3 companies that own all of the radio stations in the United States, if you want to go on those radio stations, you have to fit their format.
Yes.
You don't fit the format, you're not getting on. And to fit their format, you got to sound exactly like what they want to hear. There is very little innovation out there.
Yeah.
And so you turn around and you pick somebody. Very rarely do they come out with a new sound or a really good sound. It's a copy of something else that they know other people will pay attention to. So you, again, fall into the mediocrity that you're talking about.
Mm. Yeah. Everybody's so afraid to try something new.
Yeah.
And they just go with the old formula. You mentioned analog. There is one studio in Torrington, Connecticut. I want to give them a shout out because they're friends of mine. They own Red Room Sound Studio, Lucinda Rowe and Mick Connolly, and it's all 100% analog.
Nice.
It's a great studio. So if any musicians who are watching the show, local artists, Torrington, Connecticut, Lucinda Rowe, Mick Connolly, Red Room Sound Studio. And if you don't like analog, but you want that sound, they have ways of doing that digital, but making it sound analog. But for the most part, it's all tape. And I've listened to several artists. We're going to have another artist on here. His name is Joey Witt, and the band's Joey Witt in a Definition. And I love it. Like you said, it sounds more natural, more alive. And I grew up, I'm 52. I grew up in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and I love all that stuff. And it's so hard to listen to the newer stuff. There is some good stuff, but for the most part, I'm always going back to the classics.
Well, I've got to go back to them. I didn't know they were here, to be honest with you, because I have original songs on tape. And I don't know of any studio that has a machine that can play the tape to make copies for me or to work off of those tapes on, because everything is digital. I recorded my last CD with Long Hill Company in Shelton. Mm-hmm. And I was going back to them to say, I want to do this to this song, this, and they said, you got to start from scratch, you got to start all over. Everything's digital. We don't even have those machines anymore.
Right.
So I'm sitting here and I held on to these tapes. Why? And because the tape was this big and very expensive. That's what I.
Good timing. Good timing.
Yeah, you know what? You were waiting to be interviewed by me and Wibo. So.
Yeah, the local artist show.
After the interview, I'm going to give you her information. Get in touch with her. They are people in the world, and they will help you out. Getting back to you, you did a lot. You worked at Capitol Records, but you also worked at Decca Records. What did you do there?
Well, the promise was that I was in the service with a couple of guys. I don't know if overseas, the musicians union is very, very strong. So if you're in a foreign country, you can't get up and play. If, for instance, we were in Korea at the time, and the only people allowed to play in the clubs were the Koreans, and they weren't the best by any means. And different countries would trade with them. So if they had a Filipino band come to Korea, then there had to be a Korean band in the Philippines playing at the same time. The union worked within all the countries to make sure that those individual countries had plenty of work.
Yeah.
The problem was, now here I am a GI. I'm overseas. I got a guitar and I can't play. And I was in a club one night and the band didn't show up. So I went over to the owner, and this was on a military base now. And I went over to the manager and I said, well, how much trouble would I get into if I just brought my guitar over and sat down and played? Brought a couple guys with me, and they said, as long as nobody finds out, then I guess it's okay. I said, you're not paying me. Okay. So now remember, we're in the front line. So I'm out there playing. We had a great night. GIs love seeing Americans play. I had 2 guys join me that night. And then as we were trying to pack up, I noticed there was a second lieutenant standing in the door, and I was in serious trouble. So, Sergeant, come on over here.
Oh boy.
And I said, oh, well, okay. So I went over and he says, Friday night, you show up in your Class A uniforms with your 2 buddies. You're playing at the officers club.
Oh, all right.
And I said, sir, I can't do that. I'm on the front line that night. I mean, I'm not a musician. I'm actually an air police officer in the K-9 division, and I'll be out somewhere that way. And he said, I don't think you're listening to me, Sergeant. I told you you're going to be playing in the officers club. So I said, well, sir, let's, in all due respect, you're going to have to give my commanding officer written orders in order for me to get out of being on the line. I mean, he said, no problem. And I thought he was joking. And the next day I got woke up by an MP, told me to report to the CO, and we had orders to play in the officers club.
Wow.
And we did. And that was the end of my duty, because we played there. Another general came over and said, where'd these guys come from? I thought I was going to sit down and hear a Korean band. And they said, no, well, we're special here. And he said, no, you're not anymore, because they're coming with me. Next thing, we were in Yokota, Japan, and Misawa, Japan, Tachikawa, Japan. We went to Okinawa. We did a complete tour of the whole Pacific Theater, collecting money, being in the Air Force and playing. And then they hitched us up with USO. So we had quite a time doing all that stuff in the service. And then, so when I got out of the service, that's when one of my buddies said, who had gotten out in Michigan, said, look, one of my high school buddies is an R&B guy at Decca Records in Cleveland. Let's go down and talk to him. So we did a demo for Decca Records. Decca Records says, we want to sign you, but we don't want to sign the 2 of you as the Everly Brothers. You need to come back as a band. And my buddy said, well, I don't want to be in a band again. I don't want to, and I said, oh, don't let me down. And he did. And that's basically when I turned around and said, look, I did a couple things for Decca, but that's it. I'm coming home. I'm not sticking my neck out anymore. And that's when I moved back to Connecticut in '77 and started meeting the local guys here and putting something together locally. But again, bands back in those days, it was a lot of fun, great times, no money. And that's why I had to go on the road as a soloist.
You know what I like about you? The big saying is right place at the right time, but you took advantage of every situation that you were in. Like, some people would be like, I don't know if I could do this. Like, no, let's do it. So, I love the fact that you had so many opportunities, but you seized on every opportunity. You got to do so much that most people would never have a chance to do.
Well, you keep out there, but it's a labor of love. There's a discipline.
Yes, exactly.
You have to, I was up on stage playing in Mohawk. I have one of my guitars is a D28 12-string Martin, and Roger McGuinn came up on stage with the same guitar. And that was my in when we were done playing, to go sit down with him. And of course, he wanted to see my guitar, and of course, I wanted to see his guitar, and we traded back and forth. And the joke is, today, I still don't know whose guitar I have. I'm not going to say, hey, guess what? I got a Roger McGuinn guitar. I can't. But we played each other's guitar so many times that you know, what it is what it is. Doesn't make any difference to me.
When
But
you try to sell an eBay, it's going to be Roger McGuinn's guitar.
yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, there's my retirement right there. But you know me, there's no such thing as the R word. Never really happened.
I love it. There's no stopping you.
No.
What was the defining moment in your career?
Well, I've had a number of times where I could have gone forward and didn't. And some of them were very rewarding and some of them not. The first one that happened, I was still in the Air Force and I only had a few weeks left to go. And the Air Force said, we want to use the three of you guys as a promotional for the military. And we're going to put you on the Johnny Carson show.
Oh,
And I said, well, boy, I think we got a shoe in now.
yeah.
That was our first big offer. Problem was the show was not going to air for another year. So if we went on the Johnny Carson show, and then before it went on the air, we were all discharged, then they couldn't use us as a promotional tool.
Oh.
So they wanted all of us to re-enlist for another 4 years. Well, I don't have to tell you, all three of us said no.
Yeah.
So like I said, you've got a huge thing in front of you, and it didn't work out. Just you know, I was in Nashville. I had an offer to sign with RCA, and unfortunately, I was married at the time, and it wasn't working. And if I had stayed in Nashville, it wouldn't have worked. So I decided, well, I'm not going to trade my family for my music. I came home, and it didn't work anyway. So, but you know, there are those times you make decisions, and you have to be able to sit back years later and say, you know what, boy, I could have done better if I did this, but I still think I made the right decision each time, you know, went forward. I did do 18 years out on Block Island for the agency through the summers. And I met a lot of people out there, had a lot of great times out there. That was a beautiful place to entertain. And one time I was at a place called Champlin's Marina playing, and about 30 people came in the door all at once. A gentleman walked up to me, my fault, I didn't recognize him. And he said, you know, my whole entourage here, we're going to sit over here. There's a couple of people that like America tunes. He said, do you think you could rip a couple of them off? And I said, oh, absolutely. I really like America. So I sat down and I played Tequila Sunrise. And they all looked at me like I had two heads. and you know, because Tequila Sunrise is an Eagles song.
Yes.
But Tequila Sunrise came in second in 1972 to the Horizon Awards. And then I turned and looked at the audience and I said, so who won the Horizon Award in 1972? And I played Ventura Highway and they all but fell off the stools. America.
Yes.
I played 8 more America tunes. Everything was going great. And the owner was looking at me. He was mad because I was 45 minutes past my time to play. And I said, don't worry about it. You're not paying me. I'm just having a ball here, you know? No, you got to cut it off. So when I cut it off, the gentleman walks up to me and says, David, I'm Dewey Bunnell of America, and you just did the best set of our songs I've ever seen any other person out of our band do. Thank you.
Wow.
That's a highlight.
That's a very, very nice highlight.
You know,
I met Dewey, and I can't remember the drummer's name. He retired now, but I saw them at it was a blues bar in New York, and I also saw them at the Oakdale, and I saw them another. I love America.
Dewey's a character.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
There's no getting around it. He's a character. But he had just cut his hair, and I didn't recognize him.
Now, for you, if you could collaborate with any musician, living or dead, who would it be?
freaks and fiends? It's your old pal, Graveyard Gill here. And I'm here to promote something. That's right. This is the scariest thing of all, commerce. And I've got a brand new DVD from Elmwood Productions in honor of the 5th anniversary of their film, Head. It's also the 20th anniversary of Elmwood Productions. This DVD is strictly limited edition, will be available April 24th at elmwoodproductions.com. That's right, you can get a copy of Head. They're gonna sell out fast because, like I said, limited. That's one of the scariest things you can think about if you're a collector. And there's lots of collectors who've been asking us for this, so you're getting what you want. We listened this time. Also on this DVD is a brand new commentary by some of the filmmakers and 2 of the other great midnight thrills, The Jungle Man and Christmas Wishes. So make sure you order your copy on Saturday, April 24th, and don't miss out. And if DVDs aren't your thing, you can still stream Head from Terror Films. Don't forget about that. Tubi, YouTube, Amazon, a bunch of places. So, collectors, get your copy of Head now. And stay tuned for more Midnight Thrills.
Now, for you, if you could collaborate with any musician, living or dead, who would it be?
As I said, I think the nicest guy I ever met was Dan Seals.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. There's a close second, a guy named Michael Martin Murphy. He's the guy who sang Wildfire
Yes.
and Caroline in the Pines. I met him a couple of times, and I don't know, he's just the kind of person that I know I could sit down and play with.
Yeah.
It's just that he immediately has that personality that you just warm right up to.
Well, there's so many great songs, and you mentioned the names, and most people won't know them by name, but as soon as they hear the song on the radio, oh my God, I love that song. I didn't realize that was that. So yeah, and you just mentioned those 2 songs. Wildfire is one of my favorites.
Well, you'd be surprised. There's not many. See, that's the other thing, Joe. I do a lot of covers, but I tried not. There's 2 laws of thumb, and it's one of the hardest laws that bands don't understand. When you're doing covers, you do covers that you know you can do extremely well, or you don't do them.
Yeah.
I don't care how popular they are. I don't care how many times you've been requested to play the song. If you can't do it extremely well, don't do it. And how many times you go out and hear a band, they play 3 or 4 songs, you go, wow, these guys are pretty damn good. And then they blow it by playing something they shouldn't.
No, right, Dave.
Right?
Right. No fact.
Speaking of cover songs and speaking of Dewey, I was watching a concert and he was telling a story, and I think it's hilarious, and it sort of goes with what you're talking about. They did a big festival with Mamas and the Papas and I don't know how many other bands, and every band played California Dreaming, and they were the last band to go on, and that was one of the songs they were playing. And Papa John said, "You guys were the best. We love that version." But it's just, it was funny because they loved that song, but every band, of course, had to play that song, which is another one of my favorites from that era, or any era, I should say.
Well, did you ever see Mamas and Papas play live?
No, unfortunately, not in person. I've seen plenty of recordings of them live, but never in person.
They were another group that had issues.
Oh, I know. Well, it's funny because Michelle Phillips is in that documentary I was telling you about, Echoing the Community. He talks a lot about that, and Papa John. And then of course, Mackenzie Phillips. I mean, there's a big history with that band. Yeah.
Yep. They were one of those groups who enjoyed the whole idea of being fashionably late.
Yes.
And I never saw the Mamas and Papas play within 45 minutes of when they were supposed to. I don't know what they were doing in the dressing room, but wasn't making music anyway.
Well, this is great, man, because the star of the local artist show had Dave Quick.
I tell you, but some of the people who were wonderful enough to go overseas and entertain the troops, those are special musicians who don't, someone, they put their life on the line going out into areas that could become violent very fast. And I will say there was one lady who truly captured my eye. I'm a young man at the time, but Gladys Knight and the Pips.
Ooh.
This lady, she had so much class. She came out on the stage, and of course, the Pips are really a class act. I mean, they had their tuxes on. She had her gown on, and she was playing, and the guys were just like, you know.
Yeah.
And then she comes out later and she plays more, and she's wearing a pair of blue jeans, and she had the same amount of class that she did when she was wearing that gown.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, I got to tell you, race relations in those days were really bad. And music was the only thing that I knew cut through everything. The only tool that I had. I was a very naive boy from New Hampshire when I went into the service. Had no idea what I was getting into. And there was a lot of sad stuff that was still going on in those days.
Yeah.
And we had a group called the Satins that you might have heard of. They were the USO tour I was in. And they liked my voice. And they said, Dave, we'd like to pull a stunt here if you would be willing. I said, hell yeah. You know, me, not yeah, but hell yeah. And they said, would you do a song for us when we are the last song of the show? We'd like you to join us. Now, first thing, be very, and Wibo's heard me say this before, and he'll probably still laugh. And then I could play guitar and harmonica at the same time, and I can't tell you how I can do that, but I can't dance. Cannot dance. And you put me with such a beautiful vocal group as the Satins, who look like marionettes tied together when they were moving. They wanted to teach me how to dance. I can tell you right now, I failed miserably, but we were the absolute highlight of the show, because the people in the audience, all GIs from every race, color, creed, everything, you know, and we come on, and here is this bleach white guy coming out there with the Satins, and I never missed a note. But let me tell you, every time they went that way, I went that way, and the left leg went up and their right leg, the harder I tried, the worse it got. And the cheers from the audience were deafening. Nothing that cut the ice between everybody in that audience than the music and what we did together to show everybody, you know, outside of combat, there is no color, there is nothing. Music is in everyone's soul, and it cut through everything. And it was one of my warmest moments to see guys in the front row of every color crying from laughter or pain.
You just proved 2 points that we talked about. One point was just have fun. And the second point was, I said earlier, I'd rather see a band on stage not be technically correct, but having a blast on stage. I'm going to enjoy that more than somebody trying to be so serious and technically correct. So yeah, that story alone just proved two of those points. And I'm so glad you had fun. I'm so glad that you showed people, like, what is everybody so worried about with race and this and that? There's so many things that we have in common, and music is definitely one of them, and has brought a lot of people together. I love that story.
Me and Dave, we how long we know each other? About 20 some years, right, Dave?
Oh Lord,
almost,
at least.
Yeah.
And any stage, wherever I see Wibo play, he grabs my butt up there. Wherever I'm playing and I see Wibo in the audience, hey, get up here. Come here. What are you doing?
If you guys if I ever in the audience, you start playing Horse with No Name, I'm getting up on stage with you.
I haven't taught that one to Wibo yet. You want to go? Wait a minute.
Yeah, not yet.
Oh, as long as I can play and I don't have to dance, I'm okay.
I'll dance.
Rick be the dancer then.
Do you have a dream tour of you playing with any artist? What would be the ultimate tour for you? I know you mentioned Dan Seals. I know you mentioned some other people but if there was, and it could be alive or dead, it could be the Beatles. It could, most people, when I ask that question, they will say, oh, John Lennon, oh, Paul McCartney.
Yeah, they all had such different personalities. I listened to Julian Lennon's interview once, and they were picking on the different members of the Beatles and saying, well, your father and Paul, it was them, and what did Ringo do? What did this? And Julian Lennon came out with an interesting statement. He says, it takes all four tires turning on a car to make it go.
Yes.
And there was a reason they picked Ringo, because of his style of drumming was going to fit with what they wanted to play. Ringo was not the drummer or the standard drummer of the time. He was an innovator. And if people know anything about Ringo, they look at him, or people who don't know, I should say, look at him and say, how awkward does he look playing the drums? And you're right, because Ringo is left-handed, and his parents wouldn't let him do anything left-handed. He had to learn how to play drums right-handed, and that's why half of his drum rolls are backwards and so unique.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so again, he had a certain style. He had a very heavy right foot, because it was the wrong foot to play the bass drum, but it was a heavy beat, which was John Lennon was looking for. And so again, he was an innovator. But yeah, I mean, there's so many. I think personality really says it. There's a lot of wonderful music out there.
Oh yeah, it is.
But if you don't have, I don't care what kind of talent you have in a band, if you don't have the chemistry, the talent will not come through.
Yeah.
And so if you're sitting with somebody like, I could sit and play with Dewey, because I've met him.
Yeah.
I've made a contact. I've got something in his personality reached out and grabbed me, like Michael Martin Murphy, like Dan Seals. I mean, there's a lot of musicians out there, but to say honestly that I could work with that guy and love it, you have to have met that person and made some kind of connection.
Yeah.
Because connection's only the first step to being creative. Creative's another whole thing. And without that connection, you can't. I couldn't do it, I don't think.
It's funny because the interview with Julian Lennon, you brought up a great point, because there's only two bands right now that I could think of in two different genres. Beatles, not one person can ever be replaced. In 80s metal, another band, if you like them or not, Motley Crue. Each member has a distinct personality, and when one member is gone, it's just not the same band. Mostly bands, they could have like the lead singer with a unknown guitar player, unknown drummer. Nobody really cares. Nobody's paying attention. But Beatles and Motley Crue, that's another band I could think of where every member is so important to the band, and each have their own personality and their own style that they can never be replaced. And I'm so glad that at least the Beatles ended when they did, in a way, because towards the end with Yoko coming in, they really weren't getting along. And I'm glad they went their separate ways before they became just, boring and didn't make good music because the chemistry was gone. So I'm glad they broke up when they did.
Well, you're a realist. You like and stay true to the original members. And that's why, again, for instance, if Ringo Starr came out with a new song next week and he came out on the stage and his drum set said the Beatles on it, you'd go, doesn't matter if the song's any good. I mean,
yeah,
we give Ringo all the respect, but he's not the Beatles. But I'm going to turn the tides here and give you another example, but people think completely differently. I know a guy named Don Henley, who's a phenomenal singer, and he's a phenomenal drummer. And he has an 8-piece band, and none of them are the original members of the Eagles. And they're on the road calling themselves the Eagles, and they're not. Any agent or any critic out there will tell you that Don Henley's band is the best Eagles tribute band there is on the road, because all of the members are hired guns from years gone by. In fact, 3 of the Eagles original members are still sitting at home, not playing, which makes it a crime that they're not out there. with the original band. But you know, you have to be a traditionalist, I guess, to say, look,
Yeah.
I love the Eagles because the first 4 or 5 of them had a certain sound. The guys that are there now are just mimicking that sound. They weren't the innovators of that sound. And there is a difference.
Well, another example of that is I have a DVD of Chicago, the band Chicago, and there's a singer that sounds exactly like the original. He is younger than the song, but he sounds. What kills me is people are paying $300, $400 to see them at Foxwoods. Like you said, it's a cover band. It's not Chicago. There's one member left. I don't even know if he's even there anymore. But when the DVD came out, and I'm not going to pay $300 to see a cover band.
No,
So,
well, if you go see Journey,
yes,
you see the Filipino gentleman who has a great voice, but he's not Steve Perry.
No.
You know, and in fact, I don't know if you saw the one thing on my bucket list. I've not been to Cleveland to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's one thing I do have to do. But the night that they inducted Journey into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it looked like the members were doing Perry a favor by inviting him there. You know, and I'm going, okay, this is, you know, I know it's me, it's my opinion, but this is not right.
no, I'm with you. I'm definitely with you on that. Now, getting back to your music, how has your sound changed or developed over time?
You keep refining over time, because after I got back from Nashville, I had a depressant time. There was a year that I put down my guitar completely because I really wanted to give up. And I had stopped writing music. I said, you know, this is what I want to do, but you know, things really went through a turmoil there. So when I started playing again, playing cover tunes, I really worked extremely hard to sound like the original artist, because that's what people truly want to hear.
Yeah.
And I've refined that a lot, and I've worked hard with the other people. One thing I find hard to teach is that someone will learn the words of a song and sing the song, and I'll stop them. And I'm saying, all right, you learn the words, but have you listened to the song? Have you listened to the singer? Have you listened to every little word he says, how he pronounces that word, how he drags this part out, how he cuts this part short? If you're really going to do a cover song, simply learning the words isn't enough. You've got to turn around, and if you're going to do a Beatles song, then you better come out with a Beatles accent, or don't bother. It's, you know, but that's the way I play. If I'm going to play a John Lennon song, then I'm going to sound like John Lennon. It's, you know, that's what you do. So you work very hard on refining your craft, and you go through stages of getting better and better and better. You don't really notice it. You just continue to refine what you do.
Now, do you have a favorite song that you play live, fan favorite?
Wildfire is one of them that people like a lot. Not only is it a beautiful song, but it's a song that you can't go very many places and ever hear it played. Another song that I like to do is a song that was released in 1967, was out for about 5-6 weeks, and they took it off the market. Nobody bought it. Nobody understood the song. Just wasn't relating to anything. And then something came along called Woodstock. And a couple of weeks after Woodstock, a producer came back and said, you know what? Grab that song back there that we threw away 3 years ago. That would be a hit today. And they pulled it out and released it. And it was #1 for the longest period of time in 1969. And it's a song called Get Together. You remember that one?
I do.
Well, when it was released, it was a flop, because in 1967, it didn't mean anything. But in 1969, the Summer of Love, bang, the connection was made, the hit was made. That's one people like a lot to hear too. But anything that people turn around, I don't go in with a song list. I think there was 840 some odd songs Rob and I collected together that we played regularly. And it's just that when somebody comes up and requests a song, and you can do it, and you can do it well, and you play it well, you feel good you're doing it, and they turn around and they give you that smile like, yeah, okay. Clink, that made my night, that you've made a connection with a perfect stranger through music. They remember.
Oh yeah, and they will be back and bring friends.
And again too, yes. Yep.
You have a favorite venue?
I did love playing out on the islands on Block Island. Very hard. The living conditions out there were horrific. But playing for those kind of crowds was amazing when we did. The local one here, I just about live at Shootgates in Terryville.
Yes.
Kevin's a very dear friend of mine. One of the few survivors in the area that still has entertainment. But I love playing at the Legions and the VFWs for the veterans, to keep their clubs alive because they're all dying too.
Yeah.
And, you do what you can to bring entertainment to these people.
Well, I got to tell you really quick. Shoot Gates used to be a club called Andy's, and
Yes,
I used to go there all the time. A lot of my friends' bands played there. I was always jumping on stage, moshing around. It was a great time. I loved it. I know that place very well. And so, actually, there's another place. Speaking of that, we're filming this in the middle of the pandemic still, and a place in New Haven just said they're going to start playing music. I can't remember the name of it. My mind went blank on it. Something 9 or there's a small club that's playing music with
Cafe 9?
Cafe 9. Thank you.
Cafe 9, yes.
Cafe 9 just said they could play music, but I don't know what's going on because I was talking to a restaurant owner. He says, "Oh no, we're not allowed to." But I was in a place called in Burlington, and they're not hiding it. It's called Sherman's Tap Rock. I saw a band play there last week, and during the summer at Crystal Bees in Sullyton, I was there almost every week. They were having in the parking lot. They set up tables, so I was able to see a lot of live music this year. But luckily now, like you said, they're opening some more clubs because it's getting colder right now. It's actually starting to get warmer. I'm sorry, it's the spring right now, but I'm hoping that by summer we'll be getting more and more clubs open because we need live music, and unfortunately,
we definitely do.
Fortunately, clubs like Toad's Place, I have a friend of mine knows the owner, and he's worried that place is going to shut down. They should take that place and make it, a historical
Monument.
something like that. I mean, it's been around for so long.
Yeah.
Rolling Stones. I'm sure you know the story about the Rolling Stones.
Well, yeah.
In the 90s, they went in there, didn't announce they were playing, didn't say who was there, and then they did a show for the people that were just there hanging out at Toad's Place. So many great legends played that place, and I hate to lose that club.
Well, the bands, I don't have a band anymore. We're hoping that in the summer the towns open up and the big country fairs open up, and then there's a draw again for the bands. My bass player works at local hospital, and they worked those people very hard. They had things going on there, and he was pretty much burned out, and he needed a rest and a break. My drummer, the same thing. He's working as a contractor now. I'm fortunate enough that I had 30 years of playing as a soloist.
Yeah.
And I've never stopped. We don't pay no attention to COVID. I've been out there still play almost every other weekend, and sometimes twice a week.
Yeah.
And in the summer, a lot more.
Yeah.
Because all of the Legions and VFWs are not owned by someone with money who can go through a couple of months with no business and survive. They all have mortgages. And if the bars aren't open, the mortgage doesn't get paid, then the American Legion Club folds. They close, they shut their doors, they foreclose, they're all done. And I have been doing concerts all summer long for all these VFWs and Legions, bringing people to help them stay afloat.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. And I'm glad that I was able to see a lot of bands out this summer, and they're starting to see some more. I definitely can't wait to see you in concert though. This is gonna be fun.
Gotta come Saturday night, Shootgates, 5 to 9.
All right, the former Andes.
And then the following week, you'll have to come hear me down at Marathon Island in Florida.
All right.
Because we're digging out on the Keys the following week.
Right. Now, when writing, do you write the melody first, then the lyrics, vice versa, or do you just mix it up? Whatever you're inspired to write first, and then you do the other afterwards?
There's certain events that help you write or get in the right frame. You'll have a melody come into your mind, and you can't shake it. And of course, like Paul McCartney used to say, his worst fear is, am I singing someone else's melody, or did this really come to me and it's mine? And you just add a thought pattern and the song grows. Yeah, there's a formula. Well, you're gonna have so many verses, you're gonna have a bridge, you're gonna have a chorus, the thing, but your thought pattern and this melody, they keep working back and forth with each other until they're one, and you can't get rid of it. And then all of a sudden it just explodes, and you write all these notes down, you have all these different intros down. And as a soloist, you take, it's a jigsaw puzzle, then you put it back together. You say, I got a song now. I haven't ever had the luxury, like the Eagles would say, Donnie Felder would come in with dozens of cassette tapes with all kinds of lead licks on it. And Glenn Frey would sit down and listen to all of them and say, oh, I might be able to use this, or I might be able to use that. And they had different kinds of collaboration to do this thing. And then when they brought in the wise guy, Mr. when they brought in Joe Walsh, Jesus Christ, you brought a whole different dynamic, which is what they were looking for. They bring in that dynamic, and he and Donnie Felder had this little competition, and Donnie Felder wrote Hotel California, and he wrote it as a single lead guitar player. And Joe Walsh said, wait a minute, I can join in with that. And then they fed against each other, and it came out, as you know, what a beautiful tune that is.
Well, it's funny, they wrote so many great songs, such great music, but I saw a documentary in them, and I didn't realize how much, maybe towards the end, they hated each other. They were on stage saying, I'm going to kill you, and they're still playing along. It's funny, but they still put on some great shows. But yeah, some of them didn't like that wise guy, Joe Walsh, that much.
Well, there was a dynamic. Again, here you go. When the Eagles started, they had a contract. There were 4 guys. You had Randy Meisner, and you had Glenn Frey and Don Henley and Bernie Layden. And their agreement as starting off, not knowing whether they ever would be successful or not. Remember, these were all the people who were in Linda Ronstadt's band.
Yes.
Wow.
And they started their group, and everything was a 4-way split. No arguments. It was, this is what we made, this much money, no matter how we made it, it's a 4-way split. And then they wanted to add a dynamic, and they brought in Donnie Felder, and everything became a 5-way split. No matter what happens, that's what it was. Randy Meisner wanted to leave, the bass player, so they had to buy him out and brought in Timothy B. Schmidt. And then Bernie Layden wanted to leave, they had to buy him out. And then they brought in Joe Walsh. Well, I think they changed so much of the dynamic of the band at that time. That's why they broke up. But 14 years later, they get back together again. And Donnie Felder is thinking, well, there's only 3 of us left. And Joe Walsh came in as a hired gun. Timothy B. Schmidt came in as a hired gun. They're on a salary, so to speak. And he thought that it was still a 3-way split between the 3 original members. Well, Don Henley and Glenn Frey had a differing opinion. And that's where the riff starts. And that's why Donnie Felder's not with them anymore either.
This is where behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes.
It's money, it's greed, it's control, it's business. And I'm into it for the love. I love to play. Until my bones can't do it anymore, I love to play. And I've had some horrific experiences which would have turned a normal person away. But I'm still at it.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example of what you're saying is the band ABBA. In 1996, 97, they were offered $1 billion to get together. And they said, no, we don't like each other. We don't want to get to, I mean, then Mamma Mia came out and, they created that. That's a different story. But I remember, because I was in radio then, I was doing a story on that, talking about how they were offered $1 billion. And they said, we really don't want to be together. We really don't want to go through this again. And they weren't having fun. So they turned down that much money. I mean, it worked out for them, obviously, in the long run with Mamma Mia, but that wasn't even planned. I don't know how that came about, but
No,
I'm still with you. Money is important, but having fun.
Having fun is all about having fun. I enjoy it myself.
It is. Look at Fleetwood Mac. All of the things that band went through, and they're
yeah, I know.
Still out there.
What
And if I can look at Keith Richards being 10 years older than I am, and he can still stand upright out there, doggone it, so can I.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue. What I want to ask you next. What motivates you?
Well, because I have truly been bit by the entertainment bug. It is a lot of work at my age to get all that equipment in the truck, in the trailer, keep things working, playing. I truly love to play. My son is extremely talented. He can hear a song, puts it in his head, he gets behind the drums, he can play it.
Oh yeah, your son, huh?
He went on tour for me for 3 years when I was in the Block Island. And it was simply okay. I think he had some good times, but he wasn't bit by the same bug I was bit by. He went through it and he said, okay, so I've done this, I gotta do something else. And he has come in and replaced our drummer a couple of times when, someone was sick or something, he'll jump in, but it just, okay, what else is there to do? You really got to be bit by that bug.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You got to love what you're doing.
You're right, Dave. Right.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. What is a musical guilty pleasure for you?
Musical guilty pleasure.
I mean, for me, and I know this might be sounding like a cliched answer, to me, there's really no guilty pleasures because I enjoy, as I mentioned earlier, all kinds of music. So if I say I like the Carpenters, to me, that's not a guilty pleasure. I just enjoy it. If I say I like Slayer, it's not a guilty pleasure. I enjoy it. So some people, I mean, it's funny how people, I'll give you an example of what I mean. One time I was at a store and I heard somebody singing, "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go." She was singing along to the radio and I caught her singing. I started smiling and she goes, "Hey, I don't even like that song. When you get the song in your head, you can't get out." I said, "I actually like that song by Wham." "Oh yeah, so do I. So do I." And I was able to say that it was okay for her to like it. She was like, "Oh, how I just in my head, I couldn't get it out." I'm like, "It's a good song. It's catchy. It's fun." "Oh yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's." So for you, do you have any guilty pleasures or are you just like, you have very eclectic taste?
I guess I have a critical side. For instance, I wasn't in the generation of people who liked the Monkees. I don't want to be disrespectful to them at all because Peter Nesmith, Michael Tork, they wrote some good songs later on and gave them to other artists to release who did very well with them.
Yeah. Well, people don't realize, sorry to interrupt you, but Neil Diamond and Carole King wrote a lot of songs for the Monkees.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a lot. But you're right. It was supposed to be a TV show. It's not even a real band. And I will say, I met Mickey Dolenz, and he was a jerk. That's all I gotta say. And I never met Michael Nesmith, but everybody who met most of the Monkees, Davy Jones was the nicest, most down-to-earth guy. But some of the other ones, I think they let it go to their head. But
at the end of the Monkees time frame, CBS came to them with a song and they said, "This is $1 million song. This is a $20 million song. This is going to blow you guys away." Mike Nesmith heard the song and he said, "I wouldn't play that on my deathbed."
Wow.
And we're out of here. And they all said, no, it was beyond teeny bopper pop for them. They were trying to mature their sound and be accepted as real musicians. And CBS came back and gave them this teeny bopper sound and said, "You don't play this, you're done." And they were done. They left, they quit.
Wow.
And I was overseas at the time. I was a canine attack dog handler. We were out in the jungle. And of course, we had these little transistor radios, they were called.
Yes, I had one.
The little earbud,
Yes.
and we had them, and you couldn't get a good station during the daytime because the military controlled all the music during the daytime. But at midnight, we had a guy come on the radio called Wolfman Jack out of LA.
Hey,
And
how are
he was
ya?
playing the top 40. So we were still, had a little bit going on with what was going on in the States. And the first time I heard this song, I said, I can't believe they allowed this song to be on the radio. I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone and their music and what they like or don't like or what, but I heard this song, it really made the hair stand up on my head. And it was the #1 song of 1973 across all venues and all charts. Anybody know what it is? Trivia question of the evening.
I'm gonna fail in this one.
Sugar, Sugar by the Archies.
Oh my God, I never would have guessed that.
Archies, huh?
And the Archies were a union studio group. It wasn't really a real band, but that was the song they wanted the Monkees to play, and
That's
everyone
funny.
turned it down. And that was the #1 song in the nation in 1973. I almost wanted to quit playing music. I said, if that's what I have to play for people who listen to me, I will not do it.
Wow.
Well, you mentioned Wolfman Jack because I think he was a great personality as a DJ. And there's one DJ I think that played such an important role in the revolution of rock and roll, and that's Alan Freed.
Oh, yes.
He unfortunately was involved in the payola scandal, but I think with that, there's good and bad with that. What I mean by is, Wibo, I'm sure you know about this. He'd say, all right, man, you want your record played? Give me a couple bucks, I'll play your record. I think he introduced a lot of bands that never would have been heard because of that, but unfortunately he had a lot of other issues too, and he died of cirrhosis. But I think that he's actually credited with creating the term rock and roll, and he did a lot for all these bands in the 50s. And I think that, without him, a lot of these bands wouldn't be where they are today.
Absolutely. You're correct. You can't go into a radio station today and say, hey, here's my CD. Will you put this on the air?
No,
they show you the exit sign.
Yeah.
Every song that goes on the radio is pre-programmed by Clearwater Company and Sony. And if it's not cleared by those two companies, it's not going on the air.
It's true.
Because everything involves money. Every time a song hits the air, somebody's getting paid for that song. Do you know that John Lennon, when he died, was making $300,000+ a week on radio royalties alone?
Wow. Yeah.
Because every time a Beatles song went on the air, he got a check. And because they control that, because they get a piece of that pot, no, you're not getting your song on the air.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you a funny story about that because I interned with Litch at WHCN. I had a job at WCCC, and there's one. I'll tell you two quick stories about that. One was they used to have a countdown every Thanksgiving, the top 100 songs of all time. Yeah. And what happened was one year I was there, it was 92. The Doors won. And the programmer said, no way, people are going to freak out. It's always Stairway to Heaven. We have to make the Stairway to Heaven. So they made Stairway to Heaven #1, even though the people calling in, I want to hear the Doors, the Doors, the Doors. I was the one answering the phone for all of Litch's shifts. And it was funny. He's like, no, people are going to freak out. Led Zeppelin always wins. So yeah, there's the other thing I was going to talk about was when I was at CCC, the program director heard my tape. Oh, you have a personality? No, we don't want that. Just say the time, the temperature, and the song. We have this, and if you don't play a song, you have to tell us why you didn't play it. So yeah, this was in 92, and that was very corporate back then. Now forget it. It's 1,000 times worse. Where now they have the DJs coming in recording 4 shows in one day, so they don't have to pay them for the whole week. Yeah, it's bad.
No, there's nothing live anymore. There's no feeling. That's what I'm saying. No,
it's really sad. So you definitely were in the playing music, he started playing music, I think, in the best era. And it's just my personal opinion. That's when people were able to be musicians. You were able to experiment. You were able to have some fun, and you were able to make some money from it. Now, I don't know how musicians can make money with people downloading, or they get 3-cent royalty checks.
Yeah.
Well, you
Apple.
wanted to see the Beatles in the 60s, your tickets were $5 and $10 a piece.
Yeah.
Today, I don't know if you read Stevie Nicks' new book. She had a choice: put Fleetwood Mac back together again, go on the road and play all the old songs, or she had like 2 albums worth of new songs that she wanted to record. And all of her advisors said, nobody wants to hear your new music.
Mm-hmm.
And even if your new music was good, within 15 minutes of the release, it would all be pirated and you're not going to make any money.
Yep.
That's why these people charge $300 a seat at the concerts, because there is no more money coming in from record and radio.
No.
Like the money's not there anymore.
I know.
They're going to make it up somehow.
Yep. What advice would you give to up and coming musicians?
Depending on what their goals were.
If
I have
they-
a good friend in New Haven. Name is Michael Bolton.
Ah,
And Michael is, again, quite a character. And he'll tell you that Aaron and one of his brothers, that I've played with Aaron Bolton a couple of times, there is a certain part where how much are you willing to sacrifice in order to meet your goal? So you have to convince yourself first that you have a reasonable goal. And some people have a hard time doing that. And some people today, especially women, if they're going to Nashville, they're going to New York, God, I feel so sorry for them, because the price they have to pay to get anywhere is beyond a price that I would pay. You're really going to have to sell your soul if you're going to get to the top of the charts today. It's that difficult and nasty business. So if you set reasonable goals, there's a way to work up to those reasonable goals.
yeah.
But I was never, in my lifetime, I like food.
No.
I like to sleep in a nice, clean environment. I am not the kind of person like Bob Dylan or any of these people who had no problem sleeping on the street out in Central Park and begging on the corner, playing your guitar, and all of a sudden one day somebody comes by, discovers you, and then 2 years later you're a millionaire. I don't care if you dangled $1 million in front of my face. I was not one of those people who was willing to be a homeless person with a guitar. And I've been to Nashville and New York. I've seen literally hundreds of people that live that way. And I
Yeah.
wasn't willing to pay that price.
Well, you mentioned Michael Bolton. I interviewed a drummer. He played with Michael Bolton. He actually played with him. His real name was Michael Bolton.
You know,
Bobby Torello. Did you ever work with him or know him?
no.
Okay. Because he played with him. He went on, he didn't never played any of his records, but he played with him when he was on tour. And he was telling me the same thing about Michael Bolton. So he's very much a character. And he had a lot of fun playing with him. But yeah, he was telling some behind the scenes stories about him.
Well, that's really what Michael told me, because I asked him,
Yeah.
where do you draw the line? Now,
Right.
I've read Michael Bolton's book where he's walking out the door with a wife and 2 girls, 2 children, evicted from an apartment. They didn't have a dime. He wouldn't go get a job.
Mm-hmm.
He was a musician, that musician mentality.
Yeah.
And he walked into the studio, and that's when somebody said, Michael, stop trying to write songs. I got an idea. Why don't you try to write ditties for advertisements?
Hey, Dave, did you ever meet Michael's brother?
Yeah, in fact, you and I both did. Remember the little church up there in
Yeah,
Torrington?
yeah, we done a benefit.
Yes,
And he
Yep.
was there, and we met him, we talked to him.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
I've seen him a number of times since then, but that's what Michael all of a sudden exploded by writing commercials for McDonald's, for the Army, for all kinds of corporate. Now he started making money. But again, and I'm not being critical of him, everybody has their way. But if I have a wife and 2 kids and I'm not making any money playing music, I'm not going to allow my family to go hungry. I'm
No.
going to have 2 or 3 part-time jobs, and I'm going to be working around the clock because I guess I got priorities. And, you know, every individual has different priorities, but you've got to say, okay, here's a goal. There's got to be a way to reach that goal, one goal at a time, and work your way up. And sometimes you get to a certain level where you say, the price to reach the next level is not worth the cost.
Mm.
Or you're just not, you're willing to keep striving, but you have other disciplines that need your attention just as much.
Yeah.
And that's why I always never left a full-time job, always had medical benefits and things for my family. I did that first, coached Little League and basketball and everything else for you.
Volunteer.
And then every night I was banging away at the clubs. But, you know, I did my best to have the best of both worlds.
That's why you mentioned writing commercials. And there's another musician that started off writing commercials, and that's Barry Manilow.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen him in concert. He does a whole, this was years ago, he did a whole medley of all the commercials. One that you would know is Have Yourself a Break Today, McDonald's, but he does it with the kazoo. It's hilarious. Yep. There's a couple other artists that got their start writing commercials, and that's where especially back then, that's where the money was, but they were able to make a living off of that and then play their own music too.
Well, your greatest ripoff was a guy named Neil Diamond who sat down one day with a promoter, and the guy said, why don't you write, commercials and stuff? And Neil said, nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And he sat down, he picks up his guitar and he starts playing a little ditty, and it goes, oh, it's a Pepsi generation coming at you, going strong. And he was fooling around, and the guy stole it.
Oh my God,
Sold
really?
it to Pepsi. You all know the song.
That's
Neil
funny.
Diamond did not get paid for writing that.
Yeah.
Oh man. You mentioned, writing the lyrics, writing the melody. I just saw a documentary on the Bee Gees. What impressed me the most about them, I don't know if you saw this, Barry Gibb would write the lyrics right before recording. They'd say, we're in the studio, all right, we have the melody, listen, and they would write the song probably 5 minutes before they recorded it. It's amazing that they would be able to do it. And all the songs he's written. I think it was only behind McCartney and Lennon, he wrote the #1 singles.
Yeah, well, it's the chemistry.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. The level of talent could be, but if you don't have the chemistry,
Yes.
because when you do have that chemistry and things start to work, you can feel it.
Oh yeah.
You can feel it when you're playing in a group of people. When something is really clicking, you just turn around, you got to smile and go, wow. You got to really savor that moment when you finally reached that kind of chemistry.
Yeah. Yep. Now, you mentioned before CDs and records. How many recordings do you have? So I know you mentioned a lot of tapes. I'm going to get you in touch with Lucinda and Mick later on. But for you, do you have any recordings that people can hear either on iTunes or buy on Amazon or even at a record store if one exists anymore?
It exists anymore. I think our last release was in 94.
Okay.
I haven't done any real writing and stuff since then. It's basically just been playing hard.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do now, is really retire from my regular job after 38 years.
No, that long, Dave.
I've been with them that long, Wibo.
Wow.
And but I've been playing 45. So there you see where my level. But yeah, it's time to get back into, I have a studio, and it's time for me to get back into writing and enjoying the music even more than I do right now.
All right.
I love the playing. I'll never stop. But I want to get back into the writing, because that's really where you just open up your heart. You're exposing everything that you have as a feeling through your music. And if somebody really starts to enjoy it, there's no greater reward.
You ever write music for other musicians?
No, I don't. No.
Okay.
But saying, I think it's the greatest surprise. I mean, especially on somebody of our level, when you're just driving to work one day and you turn on the radio and bang, there's one of your songs. You go, hey, that's kind of cool. So, and I've had that happen to me wonderfully a number of times. But so I can't imagine what it's like for somebody who is not an independent artist and really has somebody behind them and can't go any day by turning on the radio and not hearing one of your songs.
Yeah.
It's got to be a great reward for that.
So what's next and where can people find you?
Well, just say right now, I'm not recognizing COVID very well.
Yeah,
And I'm going out and I'm still playing at Shoot Gates a couple times a month.
can't wait to see you there.
Play the American Legion in Terryville a couple times a month.
Okay.
As I saying, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be in Marathon Island in Florida. And when I come back from that, putting our summer concert series together for a number of legions and VFWs across the state in a big effort to try and keep them all afloat. And Wibo, I just got a contact back from the folks out there, and where's it, Canton? The big, yeah. I met their, I don't know what they call him, director or whatever, the other day. He was at our post and going to schedule some of the shows out there, which is going to, it's great.
Oh,
And
you're playing, I'm playing August 19, I think.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I say, being a veteran myself, it's huge when I get to play for those guys. And what we used to organize, I'm in the American Legion Riders group, and we organize these huge motorcycle rallies. We'll have a couple hundred motorcycles and people pay so that we can have money going to different charities. And of course, I'm always involved in the concert that follows that. And so we'll have a number of those this summer to do also. But this year, it's a year of survival for a lot of the venues that I play. It's payback time. They've been paying me for years. I've lived for years. I've always had my regular job as a support group, so I could, live comfortably in my own home and, securely. These people have lost their business through this horrible fiasco of this COVID thing. Yeah. And I've tried to help a lot of people. And that's what we're entertainment and small business owners are in the same family.
You got a good heart, Dave.
Have one without the other. And so this year is a huge planning and recovery effort.
Do you have a website where people can find out where you're playing?
I have a Facebook site, absolutely.
Okay.
They can look me up on my Facebook site. Usually I post at least weekly where I'm going to be at, sometimes a month in advance in the summer, because people have a lot of vacations and they want to plan where they're going to be. And I haven't heard yet from the town for the summer concert stuff yet. I don't know if they're going to get away with it this year or not.
Done Taunton?
Yeah. Yeah, we played last year, of all things.
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird because I said in Southington, every week I went to a concert at Crystal Bees and was outside, something similar to what you're talking about. Some places seem to maybe not care or get away with it. Other places are more cautious. Yeah. So, I mean, it can be done, and it can be done safely if they're worried about that.
It can.
But I'm hoping that they are just slowly integrating more and more entertainment back into the world, because we need it.
Well, the club owners need it. They're dying, and yet I go to a lot of different clubs, and I know there are quote unquote executive orders out there state by state.
Yeah.
I have not gone into one restaurant or one club that has done the same thing that any other club has done in reference to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So where is the standard again? I don't know where it is, because I've never seen it. You go into one club and they have a plastic sheet in between each 4 people at the bar, but there's nothing anywhere else. So you go to another club where there's a single plastic sheet by the bar people and there's nothing else. Or you go to another, I was at a restaurant this afternoon and there was a plastic sheet around every table.
Yeah.
I haven't figured it out. I don't know what the standards are, but I don't believe any of them work.
Yeah. I don't know. I want to say, and on that happy note, I want to say it was so great having you on the debut episode of Rich and Wibo Present Local Artists. So you have so many great, interesting stories. I cannot wait to see you live. And I want to have you come back sometime, because I'm sure we only scratched the surface with you.
You too. I'll be happy to come back, and happy to join you and Wibo with other folks. I would love to be in on listening to other guys. Throw in a question or two.
Yeah, it'd be good.
You are welcome anytime. So Wibo, before we let him go, do you have anything else for him?
For Dave, quick, man, one thing, man, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it, man. This is our first show and a local artist show. This is going to be big.
We hope, well, you know,
Definitely got plans for this show.
I really enjoy seeing everything else that's going on in Torrington. There's a lot of good musicians in Torrington that there's no credit going to them. I didn't even know about this studio that existed here, and so you're going to learn something every time you see one of these. And it's great that you guys are promoting this and bringing it through to everybody. Love it.
Well, I think it's so important, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, there's so many local artists or great artists that are unknown, unseen, and not really heard, because local, as you said, radio only plays, you know, the top 3 songs of that week.
Top 3,
So I want this show to highlight people like you who are so talented and have so much to say. And I'm looking forward. I'm so glad Wibo got me involved with this. I'm having a great time so far, and I'm looking forward to meeting so many great and interesting people like you.
Yeah, well, then I'll get with that studio. We'll bring out some new songs to put on the radio.
Right, Dave, you the man.
All right. Well,
thanks, Dave.
Take care, guys.
Wraps up the debut episode of Rich and Wibo present the Local Artist Show. We would like to give a big thanks to the extremely talented Dave Quick for being on the show. And we would also like to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in. Enjoy your day, everyone.